Hey, what's up, guys? Little man with a big opinion here. Drinking one of my favorite little diabetic drinks. It's about 95% water, and that's the topic of today's video because I still have about 20 dishes that I need to wash. Tomorrow I've got to go to the hardware store, pick up a new outlet, and hope and pray that it's just the outlet that went bad because I couldn't use the dishwasher. Washing it by hand, realizing I'm going through a ton of water, and I'm drinking this, which is about 95% water. And we're going to talk about water today. More the idea of water storage. Might get a little bit into how we're going to collect water. But I did find it very interesting that the average American conservatively will use 50 gallons of water per day. Things change whether you take a bath or a shower, dishwasher versus washing by hand, the food that you're prepping, how many times you're flushing the toilet, how much water are you actually drinking, to keep yourself hydrated. And FEMA and preppers alike have said, emergency situations is 1 gallon of water per person per day. So if you're a family of 4, then you should have 12 gallons of water ready to go, and you've met your 72-hour requirement. But if you're 4 people, a conservative average is 50 gallons a day. There's a really big gap between 12 and 200. So the first part that they're saying in that, 1 gallon per person per day, half to 75% of that is for consumption. And that's to keep you hydrated. The other half is hygiene, food preps. That's really not a lot of water. I use the calculator based off of the number of people that I'm taking care of. Me, the wife, my cousin, my grandma, and a 2-year-old, because we live in the house right next door to each other. I would need a 10,000 gallon storage based off of the size of the roof area, our average rainfall, and they calculate how much evaporates, that sort of thing. And then they recommended about 3,000 gallons more. That way you are storing even more of it, just in case there's a drought or a longer period where you're not having any rain. So that's flushing your toilet. You're using, a few gallons to do that. That's bathing. That's washing dishes. That's doing all of those different things. And I know as preppers, I price the system out to be several thousand. I don't have several thousand sitting around. Yes, I keep saying, prepping should be a lifestyle. But there should also be a level of live your everyday life. I like to buy magic cards. I like to play video games. We like to go to amusement parks and, put money into retirement and do all of those different things. So there's got to be some in between. You shouldn't just have zero storage. You picked up a case of water that's going to last you a day at most, if you're drinking it, like if you're specifically just drinking it, you can stretch it a little bit further, but you start to run into some of those other issues. Part of my in between is I'm in Scouts. I get a lot of these Nalgene's. I am getting close to over 100 of them. They get left in the lost and found, and at the end of the week, I pick up one or two, and I've been doing that for almost 2 decades now. So I use those for camping, hiking, that kind of stuff. But while they're sitting on a shelf, they're full of water. We can go on a little trip because I have some sitting on a shelf over here, and it's nice and dark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I only have 5 sitting there. Actually, I also have the cats hanging out on the table. You have pets too. That increases the amount of water that you have to store if you want to keep your little fur babies alive. I know a shelf in my office is loaded with them. But I do the same thing with the mason jars I've got under the sink. If we don't have anything stored in them, we haven't pickled anything from the garden, or I haven't filled them full of oats or whatever, they're going to take up the same amount of space. Might as well fill them up with water. Just there, from what I've counted up, that's like a week's worth of water. It's about 30 gallons. The other thing is you can spend between 10 and 50 bucks on the 5 to 7 gallon containers. Again, it's multi-purpose. I take them on, any camping trips with Scouts or the family. And there's 4 or 5 of those. I keep them stored out in the shed, and that's another week's worth of water. That doesn't cost thousands of dollars. Like if you're planning out a budget, 5-gallon water container is going to run you about $15-20. If you're one person, for 20 bucks, you store that water container, you switch it out every 6 months or so, and you're pretty darn close to a week's worth of water storage for like the bare minimum keeping me alive. 55 gallon barrels. That's the next thing that I'd look at, and I picked mine up off of Facebook Marketplace. I specifically made sure that the previous item stored in it was a food item, and I think they said it was pickles. Bit of bleach, bit of hot water, rolled it around, switched it out, rinsed it out. Did that a couple of times, and that barrel stays filled up. I put a spigot on it, and I fill the dog's water up with it. And so I go out, because she's got like a 20-gallon container. I just got a little like 2-foot hose. I set it up on a box. That way it's got a little bit of gravity helping out. I refill hers. I stick the water hose in it, and I top it back off. So that stays full all the time. And then, a much cheaper option, and I really don't recommend it. Don't think I have an example. Actually, I do have an example. This has a Diet Dr. Pepper stored in it. The soda ones, I would not completely recommend that. Maybe for your pets. It's going to have a bad aftertaste. It is a short-term solution if you want to have some level of comfort. The better option is the plastic juice containers. Rinse them out, dump a tablespoon of bleach in it, shake it around, rinse it, fill it back up. You can use those for a few years before the plastic starts to degrade and becomes a problem. But they already say everything we're consuming has microplastics, so maybe you can push it longer if you want to. On this same note, um, we purchased a lot of these concentrate drink inserts because that's what the kid likes. I also know, especially in today's world, plain water is just, it's terrible. Most people don't like it. That's also why I purchased this little tabletop ice maker, because my solar um battery bank that I have can run it. Uh, you know, a nice cold glass of water is very refreshing over lukewarm water. Another thing that I purchased is a bathtub bladder. Especially in our older house, I think our bathtubs pushing a 60-gallon bathtub. That's more for something bad's about to happen. To give you a level of warning. If you live near the coast, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and fill the thing up. It's a lot of water very, very quickly. The one that I got has a little hand pump to get the water out. Um, when you inevitably lose power, something breaks, like a water main. Um, you know, when I lived in Corpus Christi, we used it mostly for putting water in our toilet so that we can continue to flush it. Uh, that saved a lot of heartache there. And then obviously, you scale up. Whatever your budget is, they make these really cool water bricks that are stackable, heavy duty plastic. I've seen people store them under their beds, in the bottom of closets. They keep a couple in their vehicle. And then you're getting into the big water storages that, start at, you know, 50, 100 gallons and can go up to thousands of gallons. Depends on where you live. The state of Texas, I know this much. Even an HOA, like they specifically passed a law saying HOA can't deny you rainwater harvesting. Um, Anywhere you live, you can collect water in the state of Texas, and they've passed laws protecting that. There's actually there's like 4 cities in the state of Texas. I know Austin's one of them. That there is a rebate, uh, and then schools and hospitals and like government buildings, they get a tax break on implementing a rain catchment system. Um, so the sky is the limit on this. Once you get your system in place, maintenance, have spare parts, um, you know, you get up to the 10,000 gallons and, it's large enough that you can fit inside of it to clean it, kind of thing. There's plenty of documents online on how to set it up. You can go super, super fancy and, have added filtration to it. Um, you know, you can have pumps that are sub pumps that are super quiet, or a pump outside of it. You can add your solar. Uh, you can set up smaller stuff with like a small water tower to, get you a little gravity for, gardens or pets or animals. Um, you can have it hook into your house, where I've seen a fancy system where, it was turning a valve and it goes from, city water to my main tank. Um, Depending on where you live, I would recommend a well. I live in city limits. I can't dig a well. Arid places, collecting the condensation in one of those boxes. I don't really know what they're called. Uh, but the other part of that is knowing where your closest water source is. Is there a creek? Is there a river, lake, ocean? You know, me personally, I think it's like point 0.4, it's either 0.4 or 0.6. It was either over or under half a mile. That would be miserable. I know where it is because that's free information, and if it comes down to it, then I am making that trip. Other family members that are with me are making that trip. Some are not making it. But knowing where it is, it's a quick Google search for any of y'all. The bonus on that is knowing if that is a seasonal water source or a permanent water source. And then the bonus is you have to take into consideration 20 to 30% of the people around you might be thinking the same thing in case of a crisis. The next 20 or 30% will figure out very quickly where it is, and the last 20 or 30%, it's a coin toss kind of thing. And on top of that, knowing how to purify your water, whether you need to boil it and run it through some sort of cloth, setting up some sort of gravity, filtration, whether it's buying like a Sawyer gravity feeder, a Berkey system, or knowing the natural stuff to set it up. Using charcoal, sand, gravel, and some sort of, cloth as a filter. You're doing the natural process that the earth does when you're getting water up out of your well. If you'd like to see me make one of those, I can. I think it's been done plenty of other times, but I'll make it if y'all want to see it. That's the lowdown on water. If you feel like you're prepared because you listened to FEMA, you're probably better prepared than 85% of the country. But also know that is survival rations long enough for some sort of, local, state, or federal system to come in and fill the gap until regular services can be reestablished. And if you know anything about major disasters, they basically all last longer than 72 hours. I watched a guy making prepping videos talking about not having power for like 16 days after a hurricane, not having internet or cell service for like 12, not being able to use their utilities. I think he said like 37 days before, they said water was coming through the tap again and it was, potable. It was like 25 days before they had water coming through, but they were under a boil water notice. You got to keep yourself clean. Hygiene is important. You got to prepare all that rice and beans because it lasts forever, but you're going to consume gallons of water prepping that food. If you spend some more money and got some Mountain House food, you're going to be using plenty of water to rehydrate it. You got to think about your pets. You've got to think about your bodily waste coming out and how you're going to make that go away. And then, just, having to use some water to mop the floors because there was a mess. Maybe not washing your car in a situation like that. But your clothes, your gear, any of that stuff, you need a lot more than a gallon per person per day. Any amount of water storage is better than none. You know, if I was starting brand new tomorrow and I knew I could spend, $10 to get, the line goes up to 48 ounces, it's probably right at 50 ounces. I'm a small dude. I've actually calculated, the amount of water that I should consume in a day, and it's like 63 ounces. So this is pretty close to me staying hydrated in a day. I would rather have this one water bottle filled with water than have no water at all and be stuck wandering around, looking for water, being stuck with looking for water and also having to make sure it's drinkable. If I fill that water bottle up, I know the water coming out at this time is drinkable. And it's baby steps. It's, hey, this month I bought one 5-gallon container, filled it up with water, stuck it in a closet, and, set a timer to, dump it in the garden or use it for my pets or use it to cook food and recycle it. And it's just a rinse and repeat process. Baby steps, figure out your prepping budget and increase that. Go with bigger size containers, set up a rain barrel for the garden. I'm looking to get a barrel for the chicken coop area so I can just kind of forget about having to give them water. And, one prepping item at a time, stacked to the rafters. That is a place where I say, there is a end goal. For me, the end goal would be 10,000 gallons of water storage. Have a couple of backup parts, and we're good to go. Food's a different story. That could be bought forever, but this video isn't about food. The next one could be about food, if you want it to. Let me know in the comment section down below. Subscribe to the channel. It really helps it out. Leave your comments down below. I thumbs up it, respond to it. We're small enough for that still. And share this video with a friend or family member. Bring them in to this, because the more of us that are prepared, the better off we'll be when, a disaster strikes. Till then, catch you on the next one.